Okay, just a brief little heads up before we begin. Because I don't have time to rewatch the entirety of the original Dragon Ball Z, and also because I just prefer a different dub. Well, because of that, to cover Dragon Ball Z, we're gonna have to go the quick abridged route. And because of that, the versions we're gonna be reviewing for the marathons, for Super Saiyan-Tember for this final big finale, is going to be from DBZ Kai. This is my personal preferred way to watch the series. It's shorter, it's faster paced, it cuts out pretty much all the filler, and it makes it a lot more easy to watch and sit through. Because it cuts out all the filler. Yes, I know what you're going to say. Oh, but that means that the fun, goofy driving episode isn't in here. Boo! 0 out of 10, yada yada yada. Look, I understand that it's a fan favorite episode, and not all the filler of DBZ is bad. But some of it, like Gohan's extended training before they actually get to the fight with the Saiyans, or the absolutely awful Garlic Jr. saga. Yeah, I would rather have to skip completely past that and lose one good episode and watch it in a much faster paced way. And thus, DBZ Kai. And yes, I know a lot of people hate Kai because they think, oh, well, they censor a lot of things, or, oh, it's not at all as great as the other version, or, oh, it's too polished, yada yada yada, blah blah blah. Point is, with Dragon Ball Z Kai, this is why I personally enjoy it more. A, it's the only DVD release of Dragon Ball Z that isn't horribly butchered. Like, there's no white grain, there's no grain removal, there's no friggin' cropping, there's none of that. It's actually in very good quality. The animation's still in great quality, even touched up a small tad, and no, they didn't remove the grain. Don't try that crap with me. No. DBZ Kai is great, specifically if you're collecting physical media, because it's as close to its original airing as possible. Not to mention, since it is touched up a little bit, and I really do mean a little bit, like maybe the colors are a little brighter, and there's a completely different dub. But what's great about the dub of DBZ Kai is that it is more accurate to the actual manga. Like, you know that famous "it's over 9,000" line that's been memed to oblivion? Well, it turns out that was actually an anime original thing, and it was made by a translation error. So, because of that, and to help maybe rewrite that wrong, DBZ Kai switched it to "it's over 8,000", the way it actually was in its original manga. And also, this is also going to be a bit of a controversial opinion, but I prefer the dub of DBZ Kai over the original. It's because, in my opinion, it has much more emotion in the performances, it feels like it's a little higher quality, and no offense to the original dub of DBZ, or the Ocean dub of DBZ that appeared way back in the day when this ran on Toonami, but to me, this is a much better dub of DBZ. There's a lot more emotion, it's a lot more in line with the stuff that would follow later in both the movies and Super, but also, because in my opinion, it just sounds better. Whereas in the original Z, while the lines themselves are still good and the delivery is still good, it sounds a bit flat. I don't know if that's just me. It could just be a me thing. But me personally, the original DBZ's dub sounds very flat. Because it was a whole new thing back then. You know, they had all these different dubs of DBZ. There was like the AB group dub. There was the Ocean Studios dub that was made in Canada. And, you know, distributed by friggin' Saban to bad effect. And then you had the Funimation cast coming in for the very first time. This is the first time they were all brought in together for this Funimation in-house cast. And because of that, they were a little bit inexperienced. Like, they didn't know how to make those guttural screams, or how to really push their vocals to their breaking point, or how to really insinuate in their vocal performances the emotion of the situation. Not to mention it just sounds dated because it's from the 90s, so... yeah, that's just my own personal taste. If you feel differently, that's okay, and I don't blame you for feeling differently if that's the case. Point is, do not sleep on Dragon Ball Z Kai. It is arguably the best physical release of Dragon Ball Z we are ever going to get, because every other time they've tried to release the original, uncut, original dub of Dragon Ball Z, they always miserably fail at it. Whether it be the crappy orange bricks or the overpriced and absolutely atrociously bad 30th anniversary set, which is now being repackaged into freaking steelbooks. Like, this is the only way I can think of that has Dragon Ball Z as faithful as possible, and it doesn't look like, overly edited freaking crap. Is there some censorship? Yes, but they dropped most of that after the Saiyan Saga. When we get to, Namek and androids and Cell, it becomes a lot less uncensored, and there is still a lot of blood, so... it's not entirely censored, it's just censored in its first saga. Keep that in mind, or at least that is how it is to my recollection. If I rewatch it and I see something differently, I will let you know, but... to my recollection, outside the Saiyan Saga, DBZ Kai is pretty uncut, and it has a much more quality voice dub. It's the same cast as the original, with the exception of Monica Rial stepping in for Tiffany Vollmer. And I've already said my whole piece about her twice already, so I'm not going to go into detail about that. But point is, I think it's a superior dub. I think it's a better way to watch DBZ, and it makes DBZ a lot more rewatchable and easier to sit through because it cuts out the filler and it's a lot faster paced, focusing mainly on just the pivotal story point aspects. Jeez, almost 8 minutes, and I was just making a freaking rant about DBZ Kai and why it gets way too much hate. So, yeah, that's my little stance on DBZ Kai. Now with that out of the way, let's get to the actual video. What's up, what's happening? Going about my animation, including 2 Super Saiyans that fight for the fate of the Earth. Welcome back to the final time I'm going to say this in this marathon, before Super Saiyans even existed in the franchise. Because we are now taking a look at the final arc of the Dragon Ball franchise, where Super Saiyans don't exist yet. And it also happens to be the very, very first saga of the Dragon Ball Z era of this franchise, the DBZ show specifically. The one that everyone's watched as a kid, the one that exploded in popularity back in the 90s, the one that pretty much created this cultural phenomenon that has allowed Dragon Ball to last throughout the ages, despite its many screw-ups that would happen later on in its lifetime. So, it all started here, and to many people, myself included, believe it or not, this is where it all started, watching the Saiyan Saga, the very first saga of Dragon Ball Z, and it's arguably the first saga that a lot of people have seen in all of anime, because it was hugely popular. It's been done to death in every single freaking Dragon Ball video game known to mankind. And it's pretty much been talked about to death by anyone and everyone. Team 4 Star, friggin' Totally Not Mark, Masako, Unrelent Gaming, all the big name Dragon Ball YouTubers you can think of have all voiced their opinions and all have talked pretty much everything that can be talked about the Saiyan Saga. Because it is such a well-known saga. It is the start of Z, it's where it got its entire new start, and not to mention how big of a switch up it was for the franchise going into this point. What do I think of it? Well, here's my written review. Enjoy. Many years have passed since the 23rd Tenkaichi Budokai tournament occurred, and the Earth has enjoyed a time of peace in the meantime. Sure, Piccolo Jr. is still running around, but he's too busy training to stir up any more trouble. Goku is now a full-grown adult with a family of his own. His childhood sweetheart Chi-Chi is now his wife. For real this time, it's not just a gag. And his young 4-year-old son Gohan, who he hopes has latent potential to become a warrior just like him. Bulma has broken up with Yamcha for good after multiple tries. Krillin's still searching for a girlfriend. Again, no surprise. Launch has left in search of Tien Shinhan. Sadly, we never see Launch again, which is a bit of a bummer, because she's such a fun character. And Roshi is still Roshi. He's still a perverted old man. So not everything has changed, but most of it has. However, that piece is about to come to an end as a new enemy arrives from the depths of outer space to eliminate humanity, and to reveal the shocking true origin of the man that we've all watched grow up throughout the entire original Dragon Ball series. To say that Z was a huge risk is possibly the biggest understatement in existence, taking everything that defined the original series and throwing almost all of it entirely out of the window in favor of something much darker and much more adult was definitely a gamble. Like, doing something like that in a long-running series is ballsy. Like, sometimes it can really pay off, and then other times you can completely alienate your audience. Thankfully, though, that gamble paid off, and as a result, possibly resulted in the best saga in the entire franchise, and arguably the best one in all of anime. The writing was razor sharp, the storytelling was immaculate and rich in deep complexity. The plot was great and a big shake-up from the previous sagas. The characters were fantastic and the continued development is top-notch, especially Piccolo, who, minor spoiler alert, turns into a good guy in one of the saddest sacrifices in the franchise, and also one of the most iconic moments in the franchise. The villains are fantastic, mostly propped up by Nappa and the iconic Prince Vegeta. Like, no one cares about Raditz. Like, we all know Raditz sucks. That's not even a joke at this point. It's pretty much just fact. Raditz sucks. He sucks as a villain, and he was really just there to be a measuring stick for Nappa and Vegeta. Pretty much, yeah, that's pretty much it. But then you have Nappa, who is so enjoyably twisted and demonic in his extremely over-the-top brutality and just how over-the-top evil he is. And then, of course, you have Vegeta. This is where Vegeta has been introduced into the franchise, and it's where Vegeta got his entire start from. And because of this is pretty much where we saw his development begin. This is where it all began for Vegeta, which you'd think for such an iconic character, to introduce him this late into the franchise's run is ballsy. Because he wasn't in the original Dragon Ball, and he wasn't even mentioned in the original Dragon Ball. Heck, this one literally opened up the gates for the entire franchise to extend its universe outwards. Literally. Like, up to this point, the entirety of Dragon Ball at this point has been on Earth. We see a few flashbacks here and there are some elements that are a little bit sci-fi-esque, like the Android 8, Major Metallitron, and of course, King Piccolo. But outside of that, we've still mostly remained on Earth. This is where that all changed. This is where it opened up outer space to everyone. Sure, this arc still takes mostly place on Earth, but it also sets up beautifully for the next saga to expand outwards into a brand new setting, which we'll talk about when we get to that review. Point is, it was a huge gamble, and it ended up paying off very well. The fights are amazing, especially Goku versus Vegeta, which is arguably one of the greatest fights in the franchise. I mean, the beam struggle, the Kaioken, the giant ape, the friggin' just all of that. Not to mention our first hint at Gohan's latent potential, which would go on to develop throughout the series, because this was supposed to be the end of the entire Dragon Ball franchise, hence why it's called Dragon Ball Z, because Z is the last letter in the alphabet. Pretty much signifying that at that point, this was going to be the end of the franchise. After they made a few sagas in this one, and fully developed this new character, Goku's son Gohan, the series would come to an end. But it was so popular, they just couldn't not stop it. At least not until a hiatus because of freaking Dragon Ball GT, so... yeah. Sorry, I'm getting off topic. I have a lot to say here. The dialogue is excellent with a lot of iconic lines. The stakes are amplified, the suspense is fantastic, the kills are brutal with a much bigger emphasis on blood and pure vicious violence. Like, there was some vicious violence in the original Dragon Ball, but it was mostly pretty tame. Like, you had a brutal moment here and there, like when Kid Goku goes through King Piccolo's chest and out his back. Like, moments like that were rare. But there was still some pretty brutal kills in there, but they were a bit more tame and cut down. They weren't as, on-screen brutal. Z is what changed that. Since it's going for just straight-up adult anime, it is allowed to do a lot more. And thus, we get much more brutal moments in this arc. Like Nappa punching off Tien's arm, or friggin' Vegeta completely obliterating a Cyberman into nothing but a pile of guts and gore, just because he failed to take down Krillin. Or, Goku getting every bone in his body crushed when Vegeta stomps on him in his Ozaru form. Like, this wasn't just brutal. It was very brutal. Brutal, vicious, malicious, and unrelenting. And it was freaking awesome. There's still a few good laughs here and there. That immortal Yamcha meme that will never die. You know which one I'm talking about. The one guy that the Cybermen actually kills because it self-destructs. And then that iconic pose that has been memed into oblivion. So much to the point where the creators themselves are self-aware and they bring it back in a hilarious filler episode in Dragon Ball Super. So, yeah, it's an iconic, hilarious, memed to death. The voice acting is still phenomenal, and especially here in DBZ Kai, because there's a lot more emotion and actual, quality to the voice acting. And I'm not saying that the voice acting of the original Z is bad. No, it's still good. I just feel like this one is higher quality and has a lot more emphasis to it. And the ending, while tragic, leaves the viewer with a sense of hope. The Saiyan Saga is iconic, not just in the franchise, but possibly in all of anime, and rightfully so. Excuse me. It's an amazing saga that accelerated the Dragon Ball series to heights it's never reached before, and popularity that was almost on the level of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles from the 80s. Yeah, Dragon Ball Z was that popular. Like, despite the censorship, despite the multiple different dubs, Dragon Ball Z in the 90s was pretty much the Ninja Turtles of the 90s, because they were super popular. I mean, yeah, you could argue, well, Power Rangers still existed back then too, and yes, in a way, it did. And it was also mega popular, but the real true successor to the incredible success of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was Dragon Ball Z, because it pretty much introduced a whole generation of humanity to anime, because you have to remember, the original Dragon Ball was not that well known back then. Back then, it was more of an obscure anime. It was more of a less respected anime. It was a very underrated, very underappreciated gem that underperformed when they tried to bring it stateside for the first time. And yes, we did eventually get a full dub of that series from start to finish in English, released in North America, but it took a while. It took a while for that to happen. So, because of that, Z had a lot to live up to. And rightfully, a lot of people were just like, oh, it's just going to be the same as the original Dragon Ball. It's not going to be successful. It's not going to stick around. It's not going to be known for generations. But no, Akira Toriyama got ballsy and decided that if he wanted his series to succeed, he had to make a drastic switch, a complete 180 from everything else leading up to this. And yeah, he succeeded in that, because of this saga, and because of Toonami, Cartoon Network's little anime block from back in the day. Dragon Ball Z was the most popular show on that block, and it was arguably one of the most popular shows in all of North America, not just Japan. Think about that. A sequel series that was meant to be the original conclusion of another series that underperformed when it was first brought stateside is now one of the biggest anime franchises in history, and arguably the biggest, most popular show of the entire 90s. The only thing that would probably come close is Power Rangers, and even then, that's live action. This is animation. This is full-fledged animation. Like, it's mind-blowing when you really sit there and think about it. So, yeah. Final verdict for the Saiyan Saga is going to be an easy, high, undeniable, and second straight in a row. 10 out of 10. It is an iconic saga. It is an amazing saga. It is arguably the best in the franchise, and arguably the best in all of anime, period. It switched up everything from the original Dragon Ball, which was a huge risk, and they found a way to make it work because everyone put in time, passion, and effort. And like I said before, Kai just has the better dub. That's just my opinion. So, yeah, that concludes my thoughts on the Saiyan Saga, and for those of you that want to check it out for yourself, well, the entirety of that saga, plus a few episodes of the next saga, are on this one DVD for DBZ Kai, which I already did a full unboxing of on my channel, so check that out if you want more information. But point is, this here has the entire Saiyan Saga in just this one Blu-ray of less than 30 episodes. Think about that. I'm pretty sure the original run of Dragon Ball Z, with all the fillers still intact, was still probably around maybe 40-50 episodes. Imagine that cut down, and with a much better dub. That's pretty much Dragon Ball Z, and not to mention, you can find this pretty freaking easily. So, yeah, that's what I would recommend. If you want to watch the Saiyan Saga from start to finish in the best quality possible without having to go to pirated sites or anything like that, watch these. Watch DBZ Kai. Yes, there's some censorship in the first saga, but it's very minimal. It's still pretty friggin' brutal. So, yeah. Get this. It's on Amazon. You can get a whole pack of them if you know where to look. Like, right here. It even says it right here. Kai is awesome and it's an absolute must-buy. Brilliantly cuts out the filler, delivers more smackdown than pro wrestling and mixed martial arts combined. Like, yeah. That's pretty much all I can say. And I erased my whole piece about DBZ Kai in the beginning of this video, so. Point is, Kai is my preferred way to watch Dragon Ball Z. It's my preferred way to rewatch Dragon Ball Z. And it's the versions that we're going to be using for these reviews. Not to mention, like I said, they're more true to the manga. So, yep, that's it for this very long review, and I'm sorry for the long tangent at the beginning of the review, but I'm just sick and tired of people absolutely hating on DBZ Kai just because of some censorship in the first arc, and whatever else. If it weren't for Kai, I wouldn't be a DBZ fan. Like, sure, I saw some original episodes here and there on Toonami reruns when my brother was watching it, but outside of that, like, I wasn't a huge mega fan yet. That is until this aired on Nicktoons, one of the channels of my childhood. Because you have to remember, I was a huge Nickelodeon kid back in the day, so being able to watch this on Nicktoons, on my favorite channel, I mean, speaks for itself. This one will always have a special place in my heart, and I will always love DBZ Kai. So, yep. That's it. Thank you guys for watching. See you next time for my review of Saw 5. If my freaking thing wants to let me try this again. See you next time for Saw 5.